Welcome to the latest of our kind of Proud2bOps virtual sessions. Today we're very fortunate to have Anjali Yoshi, who's our Deputy Chief Operating Officer from North West London Acute Provider Collaborative, and James Biggin-Lamming, who's the Director of Strategy and Transformation, joining us to give a talk about EPR implementation and acute trust collaboration, which is a case study from North West London Acute Provider Collaborative. Thank you very much. James, I'm ever so sorry that I had to bank in on our Nye Bevan friendship, but I'm very grateful that you've given up the time today to do this. Quick itinerary, we're a little bit behind, but we'll go through an introductory session, introduction session now. Then we'll go through the presentation itself. We'll then go through a Q&A with individuals in attendance, and then we'll have a quick chat. Hopefully by then some people will have got past our IT issues, and we'll have a little bit of a regional members discussion around the next steps. And just to confirm again, we are recording today's session. So without further ado, welcome, and I'm going to now hand over to Anjali and James. I know you've done lots of work in the background to prepare this, so thank you ever so much. We're very grateful to have you here. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Phil. Ange, do you want to introduce yourself first, and I'll take over and do the first couple of slides?
Yeah, of course, no problem. So hi, everyone. My name's Ange Joshi. I'm Deputy Chief Operating Officer at London North West Hospital, but working very closely with the other operational leads across the Acute Provider Collaborative.
And hi, good morning. I'm James Biggin-Lamming, Director of Strategy and Transformation at London North West, but equally working with our partners across North West London. So in Chris Whitty style, if we go next slide, please. I'm just going to start with a bit of context to explain what the North West London Acute Provider Collaborative is and where some of it comes from, and where we think we're doing a good job, because that sets some of the foundation, the background for then some of the operational, the patient improvements that come next. And we'll talk about that with our EPR rollout over the last year, but also some of the operational collaboration. Our Acute Provider Collaborative, and this is a national policy, there's nothing special about being in a provider collaborative, encompasses our hospital, which are the green dots in the middle, which is Northwick Park, Central Middlesex and Ealing, Imperial Hospital, also Imperial Healthcare, Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, the purple dots, the pink dots, and the Hillingdon hospitals, which are the blue dots. And between us, that's 12 hospitals, 33,000 staff. North West London encompasses 2.7 million people, but many of our services, a number of our services, have a regional, sort of London, national, even international reach. For example, we host St Mark's at the National Bowel Hospital at Central Middlesex. With our Acute Provider Collaborative, as I said, that having one isn't special. What makes ours a bit different? We haven't gone and joined up into some group structure. We don't have a managing director. We don't have a group director of this. What we do have is a board in common. We have a chair in common. And I think the clever thing when they worked all of this out is each of our NEDs across two organisations. And they've done that as a sort of spider web jigsaw pattern. So we don't have big power wrestling matches between inner and outer North West London. It's all sort of zagged across. And I say that has been it's been surprisingly effective. One, because it has flattened things out. When I joined 4 years ago, before the Acute Provider Collaborative, I certainly remember the chip I had on my shoulder being out in North West London with the big teaching trust in North West London. So it's certainly levelled some of those conversations out. It's also helped really spot what good practice is, or not good practice, by comparing between ourselves, because our NEDs are seeing two different organisations all the time, and it's really encouraged us in the executive and operational leads and clinical leads across the trust to get a better sense of that comparison. So it really is helping some of that culture shift and improvement between the organisation. It's important because North West London has at various times held itself up and done some really leading things, I think, in terms of the NHS. And it's had good moments and it's had challenging moments as well. And that impacts some of what we're trying to do as an acute provider collaborative as well. And one of the mixed moments is a big piece of work throughout much of the 2010s called Shaping a Healthier Future. And that looked at closing emergency departments at Central Middlesex, at Hammersmith hospitals, but also proposed shutting them at Ealing and Charing Cross. And some of the pressures behind that were the sustainability of the workforce, the evidence around high quality care, about the benefits of consolidating services. As you can imagine, though, local communities nearer those hospitals were not delighted by that. And so a lot of public protest, a lot of challenge around that. And so while Central Middlesex and Hammersmith both did close and Ealing lost its maternity service, those eventually Shaping a Healthy Future was paused. And so we find ourselves with a bit of a landscape, probably not a massive appetite for that big hospital reconfiguration at the moment, because we've looked at it. We've actually bluntly needed those services. Northwick Park is busy. It's the busiest hospital by ambulance arrivals in London at the moment. If we didn't have Ealing helping with the emergency department nearby, I don't know what we'd do. So as pressures have grown, it's been essential, but it has meant, as we look across our acute provider collaborative, what do we do to standardize and improve our services rather than big strategic shifts and moving things around? And we're very lucky, it's a dense population, but there's a lot of hospitals in not a very large area. Recognise, speaking to colleagues here from Norfolk and other more rural areas where the distances between your hospitals are much more great than what we have, and how that might influence some of that partnership. So if you go to the next slide. One of the approaches we've set up with our acute provider collaborative is this pyramid of how we think about working together. And we're going to talk about some examples on the do it once and the do it's the same today. But we've divided up everything we do between the four. We're not merging. We're not going to merge, and that plan isn't there. But we do recognise there is significant variation between our services and what we can offer. And we also recognise for our local communities who overlap and use all our hospitals, that work needs to happen sooner to promote the equity, to promote the highest standards of care that we can support and do more together than we ever could alone. And this pyramid sort of it gives a sort of sense and a setting, and it's set up like a pyramid because there are some things that are done best once. And the evidence points to it, the value it creates for our local communities are best just doing it once between the four, or fewer than 4 times. And we've got examples like that around our EPR, we'll come and talk about, but also our elective orthopaedic centre. We have one for the 4 trusts centred at Central Middlesex. There is a lot larger amount, that middle of the pyramid, though, where if we did things the same, we would help raise standards, help improve equity between our organisations and in our communities, help improve our productivity by taking the best between us. And we need to do that standardisation. That is a challenge, as I'm sure other people can appreciate here. You've had reasons for doing it locally, and all of a sudden you're having to go and align and match to someone else. So there is a journey, and I'll wrap up the conversation with our strategy and what we're doing next. But that's really where the centre of our focus is. A lot of the operational work we do together is centred around this. But then there are finally improvements we just need to get on with. We remain full sovereign organisations. There are improvements we need to make a difference to, and it's not about mudding it up with governance. If there are improvements to be made, just get on with it, and how that needs to happen locally, the standards, the quality of care, the efficiency and expectation that's still being driven locally. So I set this up because I'm going to hand to Ange now to talk about Cerner. One of the real enablers has been moving to a single electronic patient record, and I don't think it would have been possible with our collaboration. Pre-COVID, we were actually proposing going on Cerner, but only partnering with Hillingdon, who are a neighbouring trust. But actually through COVID, it made us revisit this. The Acute Provider Collaborative made us revisit this, and we decided to go as a single instance across North West London, and we're the largest single instance of Cerner in the UK at the moment, in terms of everyone on the same record. And so I'll hand over to Ange to talk about how collaboration helped with that, and the benefits it brings, but some of the challenge. So next slide, please, and over to Ange.
Thanks, James. Thank you. Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll kind of just talk us through, as you can see, how being part of the collaborative really benefited right from the beginning, which is, from when we were preparing our implementation and all the way through to now, what are we doing and what are the next steps. So I was the operational lead for the Cerner implementation here at London North West, and worked very closely with the CCIO and the CNIO as a triumvirate within London North West hospitals to deliver this. But actually, as James alluded, we one of the benefits of our launch was we did go live as a joint program with Hillingdon, and we went live in August and Hillingdon went live in November. So we made sure that we worked closely with the kind of triumvirate digital team there as well. But I think some of the benefits we saw as being part of the APC is, even when we were preparing the launch, we had the opportunity to be able to go and actually visit the live site. So, you know, go to Imperial, go to Chelsea, who, you know, Imperial had been live for a very long time. Chelsea had been live for about 8, Chelsea and Westminster had been live for about 8 years. So being able to actually go see the module in practice, go and see the different workflows was really beneficial. Learning from their lessons learned. So, you know, just being aware of the amount of prep you actually need to do before the EPR go live, you know, even simple things like operational readiness checklists, and what were some of the things we needed to make sure we had on that checklist. How did they hold some of their briefing meetings? How do we learn from that? And having that kind of really helped. I think one of the biggest benefits was our kind of digital and IT infrastructure as well. So, you know, our CIO, Robbie, he's actually, you know, been involved in the Cerner implementation across the whole APC. He was there for the Imperial go live, the Chelsea go live, and then obviously supporting this. And so having that kind of collaboration across really made a difference to just the preparation. I think in terms of the going live, you know, that's where we really felt the support. We were able to have clinical and operational colleagues from Chelsea and Westminster, from Imperial, actually come to our sites. We went live across all 3 of our sites at once. I definitely think I'd rethink that if we were going to do it again, because it was pretty intense. But I don't think we would have been able to do that if we didn't have the support from the clinical teams and the operational teams from the other sides, providing that hands-on live support. You know, we had consultants and in our outpatient areas, kind of working shoulder to shoulder with some of our clinicians when they were going live. You know, we had clinicians in theatres, again, doing the same, nurses on the wards, and then, you know, operational teams working with our kind of service managers, general managers. And BI reporting was a big part of that as well. And again, having teams who you know, were involved in the Cerner BI reporting at Chelsea and Imperial, coming to help to get our reports and data quality reports, etc., correct, really made a big difference. I also think what really helped was the offer we had from the live sites to do drop-in webinars for our admin team. So I think we all probably resonate that it's one thing doing classroom training and one thing having a chance to see the system live and demos with patients, and because we were all on one domain, it was easy to be able to then do those kind of patient pathways, etc., and demos, so people could actually get familiar with it and ask questions as they were going live and finding buttons that they didn't know what it meant. That really helped as well. I think just generally, if I was going to talk about what are some of the benefits now of all being on one single Cerner platform, it's all the kind of things that kind of align nicely to James's pyramid, which is we've been in a position where we have been able to agree workflows, standardize the way we use the system. It really helps with our workforce, because when we've got junior doctors rotating, and we're quite lucky that a lot of our rotation happens across the sector, it means they've had a chance to use it elsewhere. And when they come here, if the workflows are standardized, it doesn't take that long to then train up and embed them into the system. I think there's also that even now we sometimes do the phone a friend, you know, oh, how are you doing this on Cerner? Because we've not worked out a way around it, and that's really helps. And it does mean that from a patient perspective, you shouldn't feel any different where you go in the APC, because actually the way the teams are using the information, the way the teams are managing the pathways are the same. There's still, you know, a lot of work happening around how do we optimize our EPR? How do we make sure that the clinical pathways, that new ones we're introducing, we can standardize them? Now that, as I said, is a benefit, because it does mean that, you know, we're doing something that feels right for patients, but it comes with its challenges, because you have got a little bit longer to get through things. You've got to take it through maybe joint groups. You've got to get joint agreement to make changes to the domain, which is the right thing, but it does take longer than if you were just going at it at your own local trust kind of pace. So that is something that I would say is probably, I mean, it's not, you know, it doesn't outweigh the benefits, but it is definitely part of the challenge. But again, I think it's all about how do we make the improvements together, and some of the things we've got at the moment. So we do have, as I mentioned, we've got an EPR optimization group, which meets monthly. And again, it's, you know, all four acute collaborative trusts coming together with ways that we want to improve it, making sure we prioritize the key asks and work together to kind of shape what those pathways look like. We have one single kind of request change group now across the sector, where any changes that a trust might want to make to Cerner to improve a pathway goes through this, and it's something that we then look at whether we can standardize across the acute collaborative. And again, it's just, we've recently just set up some clinical pathway work streams. So, you know, there's a non-elective pathway, an EPMA pathway, a PAS pathway. And again, it's co-chaired by individuals from the different trusts, so that you can get different perspectives, but also start thinking about how do we use Cerner to do the further innovations and optimizations. You know, there's obviously the federated data platform. We've got the patient engagement portal. We're rolling out Doctor. All of these new kind of digital innovations have become easier to navigate and work through because we are all on the same EPR, and it means the interfaces, you only need to do that work once across the APC rather than everyone having to do it individually. So so from living and breathing the rollout, I would certainly say that I think if we didn't have the collaborative, the APC and the approach, I don't think our Cerner rollout would have been as successful as it has been. And yeah, we're kind of now working on our next steps of how do we carry on innovating? How do we carry on looking at what else Oracle Cerner has to offer in terms of AI, other modules, and how can we implement those further? So yeah, I'll leave it there. And then obviously if people have any specific EPR questions they want to pick up in the Q&A, very much happy to answer those.
Next slide, please, Phil. As well as DPR, with it being Proud2bOps, we just wanted to touch on some other ways that working as a collaborative has been helping our operational performance, our operational delivery, and our quality. So we'll sort of divide these up between us. I'll take the first one, although Anne shall add anything I've missed. One of the most successful things we've got going so far is our elective orthopedic centre. And this has been on the cards, or as an idea, has been mooted for years. In our neighbouring ICS, Southwest London, you might have heard of Swelliok, which is Southwest London Elective Orthopaedic Centre. They lead the way when you look at all of the GERF metrics on the quality of the care, the productivity of the care, and the impact. And the idea behind having that dedicated cold site to orthopaedics, pooling your resources across an area and the benefit your patients, was outstanding. And we were fortunate to have at Central Middlesex a site ideally suited to it. It's bang in the middle of northwest London, so great for all of the travel times and access. It is a newish PFI. So compared to a lot of our state that looks like something at Chernobyl, Central Middlesex is a beautiful site, but we also had some void space that we were able to invest in and build new laminar flow operating theatres. And that was possible by the financial support and sort of pooling our capital and priorities together as a collaborative, the operational support from having sufficient ASA1, ASA2 grade patients on our collective waiting list. Orthopaedics is an area with a long waiting list coming to one place, and those agreed ways of working. And it's allowed that balance, an innovative financial model. London Northwest is the lead provider. We are providing, managing the financial flows, have gone and recruited the dedicated therapy and nursing staff. And they are really operating in best practice ways. Our first patient who came through beat the best practice we were aspiring to. They came and did a same-day knee replacement, which we weren't expecting. We were aiming for sort of a one-day length of stay, and they were in and out. They said they wanted to do it, and the team, this amazing culture they've built, because they're really proud of being the North West London Elective Orthopaedic Centre, made it happen. And I saw them last week and shared, I love that story. Said, oh, it's even better. They came back 6 months later for the other knee, and we did the same again. So this fantastic dedicated team really looking at innovating and supporting and having the really best quality for the patients, absolutely dedicated to it and really specialising with that from that scale volume. It's not without its teething problems. There is, I think, some of the utilization is not where we want to hit yet, and that is work. But we're able to have that as a constructive discussion with our partners, where we're not seeing the ASA 1 and 2 coming across, and understanding some of the culture and practice and what might be going on in individual partner services about what's sharing. And it's a joined up conversation because we all share the financial risk, and that's been agreed in advance. So operational collaboration, that peer-to-peer review, and learning about how we're getting our POA pathways standardized, being able to do that across sites, the diagnostics that go within that. And it is nitty-gritty. It's on some people POA, we're doing the same test, but the threshold was milligrams off, and it was just custom practice that had been developed locally. So getting that agreed, the discharge pathways and much else. So that's been fantastic, and we're confident in time. It's going to be not quite as catchy as Swelliog, but the sort of Northwest London centre, seeing some of those similar outcomes and seeing opportunities to expand it as well, supporting some of the equitable care. We're looking at opportunities to provide some ASA3 care there as well because of the benefits. And at Central Middlesex, we also have a big sickle cell community in the sickle cell centre there. So also looking at some of the innovation opportunities, joining them up, because patients with sickle cell actually need have a higher need for orthopedics, and it all being able to be on the same site, the same practice, rather than a different hospital. The other part, so we talked a lot about orthopedics as one pathway, but we've looked at other pathways between our organisations. Some of this is specialist pathways, so work, for example, vascular. We started in 2000, we've had for many years two arterial centres, and neither centre, our centre at Northwick Park, was very rarely getting the at least 50 AAA procedures a year that was mandated. And after COVID, those numbers really did plummet. So looking at together, how do we join that up so our surgeons were able to go to St Mary's, which is the other arterial centre, and complete the the AAA procedures there. So they're still able to practice. We're not de-skilling them, but the other staff that wrap around that to make sure that high quality of care is in support with the ward and the other areas are all in place. We've been able to get that sorted. We've looked at other pathways around dermatology, looking at some of the innovations around AI and imaging, and how we're sort of being able to share some of that. Gynecology, looking at some of the sort of best practice outsourcing arrangements others have adopted locally to support some of that. So some of that mutual aid and looking at the pathways together, who's getting the best outcomes, and what can we learn some of the practice to put that in place has really expanded. And that is coming more to our strategy, which I'll talk about to close. The third area is around corporate services, and then I'll hand over to Ange. But so corporate services, we've also joined up areas like procurement, getting the economies of scale. Now there are benefits we're seeing coming through, as you'd expect from economies of scale in procurement, in terms of specialization, that purchasing power. It has been a challenge as well, some of that sort of loss of control and loss of relationship as you transition to different models, the speed or the responsiveness around that. So that's an area, but there's been, another area that's building success. We've got work on our shared people services, making sure we've got a standard offer, but also some of that sharing that best practice. We're working towards a single enterprise management system between our trusts will give better insights. And our digital services, as they've moved Cerner onto the same platform, looking at some of the infrastructure, moving into the same place, increasingly our digital teams joining up. So with that, there's these opportunities of actually sharing the expertise, particular areas where it's been hard to recruit or the expertise is hard to find, being able to pull that between the four organisations. We're really starting to see the green shoots of that success. But Andrew, I hand back just to you just to share the last bit on some of the other pathways like the mutual aid and the performance work we're able to do together.
Yeah, of course. So everyone knows that there's significant challenges with waiting list management at the moment, isn't there? So whether that's cancer, whether it's diagnostics and RTT, and mutual aid in theory has been around for a very long time. But I think what the APC does is make mutual aid a lot easier across the sector. And the main reason for that is there's no kind of performance penalty within the sector, if you like. Every patient breach is a sector breach. It's not that whole conversation is gone around, well, actually, if we are taking this patient over 78 weeks, who's going to carry the breach? It's not even a discussion anymore. It is very much just about, right, how quickly can we move the patients across? Is it the patients we're moving? Is it the clinician we're moving? And we have models that do both. There's times when if the organisation have got space on weekends or fallow list, then we can send clinicians over or patients come over. So definitely have seen benefits to the way that we can get patients seen quicker. I think one of the other pathway benefits we've seen is around joint appointments. So where we have consultants that we're able to that work across maybe say 2 or 3 of those acute trusts, usually 2. Again, that becomes a lot easier in managing those patient pathways, because they may see the consultant for, I don't know, ENT at Hillingdon for their outpatient appointment. We've got the capacity for operating, and it's the same surgeon, so they're much more likely to move, because actually the one thing about outsourcing and mutual aid is patient uptake can be really difficult. So I think just being able to offer that definitely makes a difference. And it's not just on the elective side. Although actually I should probably say one of the really important things with the elective thing we've done is we've got a single North West London access policy. So we do not have 4 different trust access policies now. There's a single North West London access policy that we use across the APC, which again just means that we're, from an equity perspective, all managing our patients in the same way. And then I think from a kind of urgent and emergency pathway, again, we've got mutual aid offers there whenever an organisation finds themselves in OPAL 4 or, in winter ICU capacity becomes a challenge. Again, having a kind of North West London transfer team makes a huge difference to how quickly we can move patients between sites where there is capacity. And the teams are developing a digital dashboard looking at our discharge portfolios and across the 4 trusts. And again, how can we help each other if we can see that there's blocks to discharge in one area? Is there something that we can do in terms of providing a bit more support? So I think there are all those operational pathways that we have to, as ops managers, deal with day to day, which have really benefited as part of the APC as well. And then I guess there's the bit around performance reporting. So actually, we've got quite a good governance structure now across the sector. There are a North West London elective care board, where again we're in a position where we can share our elective activities, share our waiting lists, ensure that we've got the opportunity to benchmark data as well, because we have a board in common. We have a single kind of integrated performance and quality report that goes to that board in common, which we all contribute to from our organisations, but it is therefore a lot more transparent in terms of where we may have opportunity to use our resources better, where there's areas that are doing well that we can learn from, and also areas that might be challenged. And as James said, having NEDs that are working across the organisations means that there is that kind of support to try and even things out if there are challenges there. We also have system oversight meetings, which again lend themselves really well to take away the conversation from why isn't this not happening to how can we help do this better, and how can we learn from what's going on in the other trusts. So it's all kind of it's a much more supportive conversation when we're looking at the benchmarking data and about doing the right thing for our patients. So I would say from an operational leadership perspective and trying to run operational workflows, having some of these joint pathways has made a huge difference. Over to you, James.
Yeah, just a final slide for questions, because yesterday we signed off our or final slide for questions. Yesterday we had our board in common meeting and we signed off our first strategy for the acute provider collaborative. A lot of what we've done was picking up things we were working on anyway, or some low-hanging fruit. But what we've talked about and agreed yesterday is, well, where do we go next, and how are we going to work together to continue improving? And we see this as, we recognise it's going to take many years, but the priorities for the next 3 years, really how we focus on aligning our best practice to make sure we're raising our standards, improving the equity of our care, and improving the value. And that challenge, enabled by Cerner, actually is a critical enabler. Starting with clarity on what's happening, using the same digital systems, who is for different pathways, for different services, for different functions, what are the best outcomes, or what are the outcomes that matter, and the real-time measurement to see who's doing that best. And then saying, well, whoever's doing that best, we should start using that, because that's the best we've already got in North West London. And then next saying, well, actually, if there's things like Gerfton Model Hospital or other things that are even better, why wait? How do we move up to that? And all move up to that, not see one hospital lead across the others and work together, and then see that continually improve, particularly when It's our research, our development. We're very lucky to have a fantastic academic health science centre, but there's best practice wherever it's taking place, that continuous improvement to continue raising standards. And whilst the strategy was sort of docked in between our individual trust strategies, we've all got priorities to get on with, but really describing that way of working and encouragement, that movement for our staff, where there is transparency, there's openness, there's an encouragement to curiosity, and an expectation. We really need to start using our data. We need to be aligning and matching to each other to drive those improvements. So when you're making improvement locally, you shouldn't be doing it by yourself. You should be getting in touch with your partners in the other local hospitals, seeing what they're doing, what you can learn from them, and doing that together. And that, from where we were as organizations a few years ago, certainly 10 years ago, where sort of very, very competitive. We've all seen some of this change in the NHS with some of the change of the payment models and COVID and everything. But it's really quite a revolutionary change of where we're encouraging people to go next, and exciting about the potential with a community of 2.5, 2.7 million people with the right size to make a bit of a difference. So with that, we'll pause and things that might prompt questions. We've been going along.
Thank you ever so much, Anjali and James. That was really impressive to hear kind of how you've brought those sites together and implemented something that I think a lot of other areas now are now looking to progress. I'm going to open the floor to questions if anyone would like to kind of go first. If not, I've got a couple, but if anyone would like to come in with some questions.
Mine weren't specific questions. I love it. Was obviously where we are in our journey. It was around all of the support things that you've done, and we're just about to start doing the FDR, the dress rehearsals, things like that, and those checklists. So for me, what I would love is being able to make contact with the people that are here, to be able to say, almost like learn from the best of what you've gone through, to not reinvent the wheel, dare I say it, because you'll have had stuff that you've added and things like that, and then we can localize it. But if we're honest, Cerner, and what we'll need to do is the same way you've done it. It doesn't matter on the location. So I'd be passionate around that. I love the drop-in webinars for people to really see and make it intelligent to them as opposed to the classroom scenario as well, because I think that's crucial for them to think, all right, okay, this is the classroom now, this is real life, and I know the dress rehearsal will do that, but it will do it for a very small percentage of people versus lots of people that we would want to make them more aware, or the people that were quite nervous around it, especially some of the clinicians. And obviously, how you managed to gain real traction with the clinical staff and the ops staff really coming as one to be able to move it all forward, because I think most places would and do struggle with that. So I'd want to again have some understanding of how that was achieved, and all that, just as a support thing for us as well to be able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. Sorry, it's just tricky. So Nick, I'm very happy to have a conversation with you offline, and share anything that might be useful in terms of our kind of the kind of things we were going through in terms of our checklist, the weekly briefings we did with our senior clinical, operational and nursing colleagues, what kind of pre-Cerner checks that we did do, and what I think if I was going to do differently, I would have done sooner. So I'm not sure when your go live is, but certainly one of the things that I was on a call with Epsom on Monday, because they're going live in May, and my answer was start now, with all your data
November.
checks. Okay, all right, yeah, start now. Get those the templates, the engagement, and that's the hardest bit actually. And getting that kind of clinical and operational engagement into this is not an IT system. This is a people system, and we are going to be the main users. So we've got to help design what those workflows look like. So yeah, I'll put my email address in the chat, and then really happy to connect offline if it's helpful.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. Isaac, your hands up.
Right. I got a couple. My first question around the standardization. So how, since it's multiple sites, how standardized was the processes prior to the EPR implementation?
Not very. I think it's a short answer. I mean, and we're all, I think probably a number of people here, big NHS organisations. Even standardisation within our organisations sometimes is a challenge. Never mind between them.
So, so like when you during the phase of implementation, what was the main challenge? Was that individuals or teams, or the actual process itself? What was the main challenge in standardizing?
It comes down to individuals, because it is a sort of, I'll speak from a transformation perspective, that change management, where even if you get the process design, everyone signed up to the process, there'll be someone who, for whatever reason, didn't turn up to the meeting or thinks their way is better, and how you able to hold them to account, support, provide the training, have the pick off the role models who other people are going to follow, rather than the role models that people are following, taking people back to the old ways. And that consistency is hard, particularly on something as complicated as an EPR, because there is so much all of a sudden to learn. You're going from, you will have been using digital systems, but how you approach and interact with patients, what you're recording, where you're recording it. And between friends, Cerner has all sorts of fantastic benefits, but is a very complicated system. There's lots of different ways of doing the same thing. And so how you standardize, people will find a way to do the thing, but it will be 8 different ways people are doing it. And so it comes out in the coding, the data and everything quite differently. And that Cerner isn't necessarily naturally designed to force you that you can only do one thing. And people often resist that as well, because we work in complicated organizations. There's good reasons why you might need a slightly different way of doing it every so often. So there is a lot of sharing, learning, going back, having good BI analytical support to see whether the problems are really coming through. We saw a lot of problems early on about just missing activity and having to work out, was it because the code, the clinic build hadn't been done right, so people weren't entering it? Was it the throughput in the clinics, because the clinicians were finding this system harder than the old system? Even when we got up to some of that, then the clinicians all of a sudden having to put in codes themselves, which was new for some of the outpatients in terms of how Cerner works, to make sure we're being appropriately coding and capturing the income. All of these, it is a huge amount of change that comes with the EPR, and it's that support that you just almost need to be a lot of man marking and fighting a lot of the time, and using your intelligence, your business intelligence, to work out where your biggest opportunity or biggest challenges are, to direct the resource and fixing that.
Yeah, thank you. The other one. So, are you able to access a patient's records who is on another site from any individual sites?
Yes. So that's one of the key benefits. If we've got a patient in our A&E today, we can see their kind of admission, attendance, discharge history across the sector. So we can see where they've been beforehand, if they've been anywhere. And that's a huge benefit, because you can then continue that patient's pathway on, get access to information, records, etc. a lot quicker. Whereas back in the day, it would be the patient tells you that they'd been at Imperial, and you'd have to get on the phone, the consultant would get on the phone and say, could you send us through, could you scan it through? It's just a lot longer. So now it's more immediate access with all the right kind of let me just say that access rules, people who are able to access it, having access to the information. But yeah, we do that. And actually, not only is it across the acute provider, the other bit of work that we're doing in terms of further innovation is our community and mental health partners, and how can we get them access to our system as well. At the moment, one way, because they don't have Cerner, but at least they can see if we've got a mental health patient or a kind of socially complex patient in our A&Es that are known to them, how can we share that information? So we're trying to do that wider access as well.
Great, yeah, and thank you.
As well as the emergency pathways for our on the planned care pathway, rendered a consultant, one of our consultant surgeons shared, he was really skeptical about Cerner, didn't see the point, but all of a sudden he had a patient in clinic and he could see what was happening, something that used to take him multiple phone calls. It was all there, and he could provide better care for the patients. Like, I get it now. This has been worth the effort, and I can see as we get more of our patients included in this, and not having to refer back to our old notes and our old system, we're seeing it in the system itself. It's going to be really powerful.
Right, perfect. Last and final. So the systems and processes which you replaced with Cerner, was that all done in one go or in a phased approach?
So from a kind of clinical ops perspective, it was reasonably phased. And this is where the hearts and minds come in. Okay, this is where it becomes quite the engagement piece becomes difficult. You know, you've got teams who've got used to systems they have. You know, we our consultants, a lot of them used to use a system called EPR, which is where they used to do a lot of their transcription, their letters, their, you know, and actually what we found with that is it took ages. We had to renew the contract on multiple occasions before we could get people to let go of it, because they just couldn't let go because they couldn't trust Cerner, and we had to allow that time. There were other systems which actually we were able to close in parallel. So you know, making sure that it was switching off almost a week after go live or 2 weeks after go live, and other systems that we switched off before we went live, because actually what we identified was the pre-work we needed to do on Cerner meant that we didn't need that system. So it was definitely in a phased approach, making sure that when doing it, it wasn't by switching something off too soon, we weren't going to impact, you know, clinical safety, documentation, but also performance reporting as a result of switching something off too soon. So if we needed to run things in parallel, we did.
And was there any backing up of the data from those systems which were going away done in advance? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, loads of it. So there's loads of backing up data. You know, we've got something called CareView, which actually migrated all our kind of historical documentation, communication, etc., letters to patients, so that we weren't going to lose that. Obviously, there's a whole data migration piece that you do, and even as part of the data migration, there were areas where we migrated data elsewhere for a short period of time so that we could hold on to that until go live, just in case there was an issue with any of the data migration. But you know, as part of FDR, you're doing multiple checks on that. And ultimately, there'll always be things that just you don't know what you don't know until you go live. But yeah, we did a lot of work to try and back up as much as we could before we went live.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Any other questions? If not, I might, if it's okay, take chair's privilege and humour myself with two, if that would be okay. Because we, just from an agenda purpose, obviously, because we've had some joining issues with the MS Teams link, we will forego the discussion at the end about a face-to-face event and next steps. What we'll do is try and eke out maximum benefit from our learner colleagues on screen. If you were to, is there one thing that you wish that you had really been aware of or known prior to your go live in your I know you talked about the reconciliation with the activity. Is there one thing that you think, I really wish we'd have focused on this little element from a learning perspective prior to your go live?
I'm happy to go first. Andrew will have the more knowledgeable answer. But however much detail you put into checking the clinic builds and the site configuration, everything else, double it and then triple it and sort of go around and get people to sign off. Because a lot of our challenges straight away, there were, summer was busy, winter's busy. It's that one of these important things that people looked, but I don't think they really looked on some of it, and it slowed us down, and that impacted patient care because we weren't getting enough patients through clinics. It impacted where we should have been fixing and moving on to other things. There were bits sort of legacy things with St Mark's. Our bowel hospital used to be at Northwood Park and was built as its own thing that was split across 2 different sites, rather than just as recognizing, look, we run 3 physical sites, let's organize it around that. So some of this checking and real focus on what's actually the system built and the build, the tickets and everything else, that's the bit to over invest in, because it really matters as you're scheduling and getting your patient care up and running again once you've done the cutover.
Yeah, James is spot on. I probably would have said that was one of the biggest learnings. I think the other thing the other 2 things for me were around smart card access. No matter how much you tell everybody to get registered for the smart cards, to make sure they've checked that they can lock and unlock their, you will, the first 3 days we had queues going down the corridor and around the floor of people who were like, my smart cards are locked and I don't have the right access, etc. So again, it's just whatever opportunity you have to get people to locally test those, get involved with the RA sooner, do that. And I think the second thing was probably around the training. So so more than the training, so the training is the training, and we then identified very quickly that although the training was there, it's very basic. It doesn't, if you're a secretary or a scheduler, it doesn't give you the detail that you need for specific patients. So we started developing QRGs in support from James's transformation team. And I think if I was to do that again, I would probably have thought about what kind of QRGs already do we have? What kind of QRGs do we need? And maybe worked closer with Cerner to develop those up front so that we could almost hand those out to the floor walkers, so that the floor walkers had more specific ways of training people rather than just, oh yeah, this is how you access the system. And some of the floor walkers were great and some of them were like, I'm not sure, but if you press that button, let's see what happens. So I do think there is something about being really specific in terms of what areas do you need floor walker support, where do you think you could do with some admin reference guides, clinical reference guides. We spent a lot of time, our clinical information officer spent a lot of time recording demo videos and getting them uploaded. But again, I think there's something about getting those out so people can play with it beforehand rather than in the middle of a clinic trying to work it out.
Thank you. And one last question from me, if it's okay, because James, I know you and I have discussed this previously with the data reconciliation. I think all providers would be genuinely fearful of that happening, and it sounds like it was multifactorial in terms of different codes, clinic throughput, and mapping, etc. Have you been able now to recover that position? And are you happy now with kind of where you've got to with that, or is it still a bit of a work in progress?
Do you want to start, Ange?
So I would say it's there's an element of it that's still work in progress, but we have done a lot of work around recovering it. I'm quite comfortable in saying we no longer have any build issues outstanding from a clinic template perspective. We've managed to clear that. It was painful. I was having to chair a weekly builds meeting where people were telling us that they had builds outstanding and we had to prioritize the resource to get those built. So I think the builds are all sorted. I think we've identified where our kind of biggest opportunities are in terms of activity coding, etc. You know, we've had a lot of support from James's team in getting on top of that procedure coding, but there's still a way to go. I mean, James and I were on our exec board earlier today where we've got clinicians saying, look, you know, we need to think about, can we upscale the training and support we've got to capture our procedure coding, because at the moment, you know, the team we have can only get to service by service, and there's still areas that we need to improve that. So I do think there is definitely still more we could do, but from an activity perspective, I think a lot of it we've managed to recover. We set up our own internal kind of performance meetings weekly with the divisions, so it's needed a lot of kind of support, scrutiny and time, but we've got there. I think the area that is still a challenge, and I imagine it would, in every organisation, it will remain a challenge for a long time, is probably waiting list management. So you still have quite a high volume of data quality issues. You know, 40% of our RTT overall PTL at the moment is made up of kind of data quality clock stops that where people are still not sure on how to do the pathway. And like James said, there's 8 different ways to do things on Cerner. They're adding encounters in the wrong place. It's creating an additional clock start. So that I think is going to take us longer. I think the activity and income side, I think we're now in a position where we know what our challenges are, and we're just trying to work through with the ops and clinical teams on recovery, and also trying to get back to the kind of pre-Cerner levels of our activity that we were delivering.
And I'd add to that the opportunity we're starting to come through, getting people to understand the codes. And the reason we want to code accurately, yes, is about being paid right, but also it influences the quality of care for all of the benchmarking that's being used through this to make sure we're comparing apples with apples, not patients with very different needs, and the productivity. So we want to recognize the team's hard work and getting the right codes. And it's some of the nuance that people might be putting a code in. If you put a slightly different code in, it's no longer an outpatient follow-up. It's an outpatient follow-up with a procedure, and it makes lots of difference. Or we've found places that, yes, they were putting information in, but they never thought to code the clinic before. We've had pacemaker checks, and they didn't realize there was a code for pacemaker checks, so they hadn't coded it. So there's had a lot of these conversations that's really just flushed out, and it's given us the impetus to go and flush it out. So it's a long journey to make it better because we're a big, complicated organization, but it is giving a focus and a priority to it that we haven't before.
You, James. Okay, we've kind of got 5 minutes to now, and obviously I'm just mindful that hopefully there'll be a large audience viewing this via the recording due to aforementioned issues. So what I'm going to quickly just do is just say a genuine heartfelt thanks to Anjali and James. I think the journey you've gone through is something that's so transferable and apt to so many different providers, particularly in the east of England at the current time. So we're really grateful for you sharing your experiences, and I think the take-home message from us is that you just cannot make any assumptions with this. It's double check, triple check, quadruple check, train, make sure that everything is lined up and as tight as possible, because it fears me with dread. I remember that conversation with James in London about the clinic and how the activity just appeared to where it had gone. So thank you ever so much for sharing that. Just for the benefit of the recording, we'll just go through what we are planning to do. We'll reach out via the WhatsApp and email channels just to set up a face-to-face session that we're aiming for September or October, so anyone can have a think about any potential speakers. It would be tremendously appreciated. We will continue with another virtual session later on in the year. Again, we'll identify an appropriate topic, so it'd be lovely if anyone, again, would make any recommendations for that. The East of England logo is also included in this slide pack that will be disseminated, and you can please feel free, if a member or if you'd like to join, please include that in your email signature to raise awareness. If you'd like to join the WhatsApp group, please do reach out, and we are constantly on the lookout for additional regional leads that would join, particularly with a face-to-face event to plan in the near future, and we're looking at Cambridge for that, but anyone that would be interested in providing support would be very much helpful. So all that remains for me to do is, again, just for one last time, to say thank you to Anjali and James. Thank you for those that have been able to join us today. Esther, thank you for your support with the administration and the organisation in the background. And I wish everyone a productive rest of their day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Cheers, guys.